You can imagine the flood, and then you can set yourself straight, and then you can prepare for it. And that means maybe you can stave it off, but it also means that maybe even if you don't stave it off, you could ride it out. And that's actually the story of Noah. Because what happens with Noah is that he can see that things are not good and that there's a flood coming. And God is maybe letting him know. And it says in the story that Noah walked with God. Remember, and that's what Adam did before he got all self-conscious about the whole thing. He walked with God. We'll talk about that more next time. But what that would mean maybe is because Noah was straight and he put himself together and his familial relationships were good, because it also says that his antennae were working. And he could see a little farther into the future than someone whose vision was completely obscured by fog and chaos. And he could tell that things were not going to go well. And so he prepared for it. And because he prepared for it, well, then things actually went pretty well for Noah, even though the flood came. And so that's an interesting thing, because that's an indeterminate issue in human existence. How big a hurricane would it take to wipe out New Orleans if everyone was prepared? Well, you're not going to wipe out the Dutch. I mean, that's going to be a tough one, man. You're going to have to conjure up a pretty damn big storm to take out their dikes. Well, how thoroughly defended could New Orleans be if nobody in the municipal and state governments was corrupt? Well, end of the hurricane problem, because that's something that we could clearly deal with. We know how to do it. And the same applies in your own life, is that there are floods coming. You can bloody well be sure of that. That's absolutely 100% certain. Some of them are going to be personal. Some of them are going to be familial. Some of them are going to be social and political and economic. It's like, are they going to be catastrophes for you? Or are you going to ride them out? Are you going to prepare? Well, the first issue might be, well, do you have your act together well enough to see them coming with enough advance warning so that you can take proper measures? Maybe just to sidestep it. Maybe just don't go where the flood is going to be. That's a simple thing. But maybe you don't have that luxury, right? And so it is going to be a catastrophe. Maybe someone in your family is going to get really, really sick, right? And maybe there's just a tiny pathway through that everything doesn't fall apart. It doesn't end in divorce. It doesn't end in death. It doesn't end in sorrow. It doesn't end in catastrophe. But the margin of error is like slimmed down to virtually zero. And every imperfection that you bring to that situation is going to increase the probability that that tragedy is going to turn into something indistinguishable from hell. And that's coming. It's coming your way. Absolutely, certainly. And so then you might think, well, since it's coming your way, maybe the best thing to do is to put yourself together so that when it comes, it can be the least amount of awful possible. So I'll close with a story. This was a very affecting story for me. My mother-in-law had frontotemporal dementia, and she developed it quite young. She was about 55, something like that. And her husband, who was a very extroverted, man-about-town guy, I grew up in a small town, everybody knew him. He was charismatic, drank too much, charismatic, good businessman, quite a remarkable person, a real character. But not exactly a family man, even though he provided for his family very well. But when his wife got sick, he really took care of her, man. It was something to see, because that's no joke, dealing with someone who has Alzheimer's for all intents and purposes, because they get taken away from you piece by piece, and that is not pretty. And then it's also hard, right? Not only is it catastrophic, but it's hard. And Jesus, he just stepped into that like perfectly. And it was way less awful than it could have been. It was just a tragedy. It wasn't hell. And then I was there when she died, and my wife's family are actually pretty good at dealing with death. As it turns out, my wife's sister is a palliative care nurse, and you have to be a pretty tough cookie to be a palliative care nurse, but you can do it, which is pretty interesting, because that means that you can go make relationships with people at the last stages of their life that are genuine relationships, and people just die on you non-stop. And yet, you know, she's a competent, alive, alert, fun person. It's like 2 thumbs up for her, man. That's someone you can rely on in a tragedy. And her other sister is a pharmacist, and my wife has volunteered in palliative care wards and is also very good at taking care of people who are genuinely not in good health. And so we were there when my mother-in-law died, and of course, you can imagine, here's a deathbed situation for you. Your mother-in-law is dying and everyone's at each other's throats. It's like, you think that's uncommon, then your eyes aren't open, because it's plenty bloody common. And then it's not just a tragedy, it's hell. And like, maybe you can stand the tragedy, but you can't stand the hell. And in this situation, that isn't what happened, is everybody pulled together, and what happened was, well, she died. But what was so interesting was the family actually came together more tightly as a consequence. And so, although there was something taken away on the one hand, there was something gained on the other that wasn't trivial. And I'm not trying to be all optimistic and, isn't the universe a wonderful place about all this? Like, someone died in an ugly way, and it was harsh. But God, it was a hell of a lot better than it could have been, and maybe it was good enough. That's the thing, is that this is something that I constantly wonder, is that if people did what they could to speak the truth and pay attention, then maybe the tragedy that's part of life wouldn't have to deteriorate into the unbearable hell that doesn't have to be part of life. And maybe we could actually tolerate the tragedy, or maybe we could even rise above it, or maybe we could even mitigate it, because we do that sort of thing all the time. And so it's always an open question. And Iliad had put it very well. Are the floods the consequence of the fact that things fall apart? Or are the floods a consequence of the fact that people make mistakes that they know they shouldn't make and make anyways? They sin, right? And that's to miss the mark, right? Because that's an archery term, to sin. And that means maybe they don't even specify the damn target, which is really, you're not going to hit it unless you specify it. Or having specified it, they just say, oh, to hell with it. It's not that important. It's like, you got to be careful when you say something like, to hell with it. It's not that important. Because one of the things that might happen to you if you say, to hell with it, it's not that important, is that you might actually end up in hell for a pretty prolonged period of time, or maybe for the remainder of your miserable existence, because it's certainly the case that people do exist there, and I've seen them exist there, and once you're there, it's no simple matter to get the hell out. And so it might matter that the things that matter get addressed. It might matter that you do what you can to walk with God. Like I said, we'll talk more about that next time. And it might be that that is how you build an ark and are protected from the flood, even if the damn thing comes. And the thing is, it will. And this is a funny thing, too, that I've noticed about our education system and the way we teach students. And their trigger warnings and all of that. Absolute rubbish. I think in most of my lectures, I'd have to have a trigger warning every 15 seconds. So, as I tell my students when they're young, it's like, look, don't fool yourself. You're going to develop a serious illness, at least one, maybe 2 or 3, and one of them is likely to be chronic. And if it isn't you, it's going to be someone you love. It's going to be your husband, it's going to be your parent, it's going to be your kids. That's coming. And so is a lot of death and pain. And so, like, just exactly what sort of person are you going to be when that shows up? And that's the right question. It isn't, how are you going to be happy in your life? It's like, good luck with that. It's a stupid ambition anyways, as far as I'm concerned, because it's too shallow. Happiness, you're lucky. That comes and goes like the sun coming out from behind a cloud. If you're happy, man, more power to you. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. It's a gift from the cosmos to be happy. But a pursuit, no, the pursuit is when the damn flood comes, you want to be the person who built the ark. And that's what the story of Noah is about. And the thing is, the flood is always coming. And that's another thing that's worth commenting on with regards to this story is, there's an apocalyptic element to the Judeo-Christian tradition. There's an idea that the end of the world is always at hand and that you should prepare to be judged. And the thing about that is it's true. And the reason it's true is because the end of your world is at hand. and it will certainly come. And when it comes, you will be judged, because it will be up to you to figure out what to do with the fact that your world just collapsed. And that'll be a moral problem of ultimate severity, because it'll push you right to your limits, and you'll find out exactly where your unaddressed weaknesses lie, because that's what happens in a crisis. And so the reason that that's an archetypal reality, and it lurks underneath the entire Judeo-Christian structure, the apocalypse, the impending apocalypse, is because we always live in apocalyptic times, and your world is always, in small ways and large ways, coming to an end. And so what do? You prepare for it. You prepare for your world to come to an end. And then maybe when the end comes, you get another world. That'd be a good deal. So the question was, positive emotions mediated by dopamine, when you're advancing towards something, say, or when you have a cue that something good is about to happen. What is the system that mediates positive emotion at the satiation level?
And if I can add the negative affect one as well. What is the circuit for that?
Yeah, okay. Well, let's start with the satiation issue. That seems mostly regulated by serotonin. The opiate issue is, there are other forms of specific reward that don't seem to be merely motivated or merely underpinned by dopamine. And the opiate system would be one of those. There's an oxytocin system as well. So there are other biochemical systems that are involved in more specific forms of reward. But the thing that's common among instances that make it appear that you're moving forward is the dopaminergic element, roughly speaking. And then one of the things that happens if you're higher in serotonin, because you're more dominant, is that you're more satiated all the time. That's why people who are low in the dominance hierarchy with decreased levels of serotonin are more impulsive and also more emotionally dysregulated. They're more impulsive because, hey, you take your positive thing when you can get it. And so they're more dissatisfied. They're more looking for anything that will produce a positive outcome. And then they're also more likely to experience diffuse negative emotion, partly because their serotonin systems are lower, indicating their tenuous status in the dominance hierarchy, meaning that everything they do that's uncertain is far more dangerous. So this is also why it's very difficult often when you're trying to treat someone who's depressed, because you could say there's not much difference between being depressed and existing in the biochemical state that being at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy would produce. In fact, they're the same thing. Well, then the question is, are you depressed or are you just at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy? Because those are not, like the symptomatology is very, very similar, but the cause and the cure are not the same. You know, because you might be at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy because you're just, everything about your life is ruined. So, and of course you're suffering. Are you depressed? So, no, not exactly. You just have nowhere to go. So here's a cool psychological study. So it's called the marshmallow test. And maybe it's even a reliable study, even though it was done by social psychologists. It's probably replicable. And it's a nice study. So you take small children and you bring them into a room and you put something that they would like in front of them, a marshmallow, and then you torture them. Basically, you say, see that marshmallow? And the kid thinks, yeah, man, I see that marshmallow. It's like, you can have that marshmallow right now. Or if you wait, I think the experiment is 10 minutes. Then you can have 2 marshmallows. And so that puts the child in quite a conundrum, because they're being asked to trade an actual, concrete, tangible marshmallow for 2 hypothetical future marshmallows. And it's not that easy to conjure up a hypothetical future reality that has the same tangible significance as something real right in front of you. And so it's an amazing thing that people can do that. And so then the experimenter leaves, and some children grab the marshmallow and just, you know, chomp that thing down right now. Other kids, they videotape kids while they're waiting, and they do all sorts of things. They whistle, they look at the ceiling, they sit on their hands, you know, they try to distract themselves. Of course, they're eyeing that marshmallow like a squirrel eyeing a nut, and trying to restrain themselves. And you know, what I see in that is that the child's prefrontal cortex, the higher cortical systems, are warring with the underlying motivational systems, more primordial motivational systems that govern such things as hunger. The hunger system, hypothalamic system, says there is something sweet and fat right sitting there, right bloody now. Grab that thing and stuff it down now. And I'm sure many of you have a constant battle with your hypothalamus with regards to sweet and fat things, and often lose. So you can feel some sympathy for the child, and the hypothalamus has these tremendously powerful tendrils upward into the brain, into the parts that we would associate more with voluntary control. And the voluntary control centers have these little weak ribbons going down to control the hypothalamus. It's pretty obvious, if you know something about neuroanatomy, what part is actually in charge when the chips are down. And it's not easy for children to learn to regulate those underlying primordial impulses, the ones that are wired in, the ones that we share with animals, but they do it. And the cool thing is, this is what Walter Mischel found, he's the guy who did the study, was that the long-term outcome for the children who can delay gratification in the marshmallow test is much more positive than it is for the children that are impulsive and eat the marshmallow instantly. It's delay of gratification. Now, it's likely that that's associated with trait conscientiousness, although that specific connection has not yet been established, but they seem conceptually very, very similar. So anyways, this emerges in children probably between the ages of 2 and 4, something like that. They should have it in place by 4, because it's very difficult for them to really interact well with other children without having that delay of gratification in place. Because if you can't delay gratification, other kids don't like you, because you want everything your way and you want it now, and you're liable to temper tantrums and that sort of thing. You haven't got the kind of self-control necessary to make you fun to play with. So you can see that emerging in children, and it's pretty interesting. And not only that, if it emerges, it predicts positive long-term outcomes, just like trait conscientiousness does, by the way, because trait conscientiousness is the second best predictor of long-term success over the lifespan. In Western cultures, it's second after intelligence. And so in our societies, the people who do best across time are the people who have high IQs and who work hard. And I would say that's a pretty decent, what would you call it? It's a validation in some sense that our cultures are working properly, because what you would want, I would say, if the system is working meritocratically like it should, and if you're trying to extract resources from those who can contribute at a higher rate, then what you would want to have happen is that the hardworking, smart people do better. Hopefully, if that's the case, then everyone does better. Hopefully. I was thinking about the issue of discrimination in relationship to sex, because I've been thinking a lot about discrimination lately, because everybody thinks discrimination is a bad idea, which is a very stupid proposition, because you're discriminating all the time. And the most fundamental form of discrimination is choice of sexual partner. And so you might say, well, why should that even be allowed? Because it is the most fundamental form of discrimination. So for example, almost everyone is racially prejudiced when it comes to sexual partners. So you think, well, is that right? What about, do you use age as an exclusionary criteria? Probably. Do you use physical attractiveness? Only insofar as you're able, right? You use it completely if you could get away with it, roughly speaking, but you can't, because the most attractive people aren't going to be anywhere near you. So you can't do it, but you'd like to. Health, yes. Strength, yes. Wealth, yes. Education, definitely. So it's unbelievably discriminatory. And so you might say, well, why is that justifiable? And it seems to me that it's something like, well, you get to say no to me if I get to say no to you. It's something like that. We've agreed that everybody gets to discriminate on that basis, and because everybody can do it, then it's fair. It's something like that. It's very much worth thinking about. You know, I don't know if you know this, but in Huxley's book, Brave New World, where the family had been completely demolished, right, and children were conceived in bottles and given and produced in factories. So the whole idea of the relationship between sex and procreation had become a taboo. One of the mantras, the slogans of the society was, Everyone belongs to everyone else. And so it was actually a social faux pas to refuse to sleep with someone, just as it was a social faux pas to have any exclusionary relationship. Because another thing that you might notice is that there's nothing more discriminatory than falling in love with someone. It's like, you're special, and all the rest of you? No. So it's the ultimate exclusionary act, right? And yet we presume that that's an acceptable, not only acceptable, we demand that as a right. And, well, that's worth thinking about a lot. Let's say that you've had repeated fights with your wife about how domestic duties are going to be arranged around mealtime. And you believe me, you're going to have those fights. And so what's happening is that meal times are unpleasant because there's a war for power going on in the kitchen, right? And so then you think one day, well, you're going to note that, and you're going to do an archaeological investigation and find out just what the hell is going on. And so you start unpacking the fact that meal times are not pleasant. And so what's in that little thing that you're unpacking, that package? Well, the entire power dynamic between men and women in the modern world is inside that dispute. And you might find that part of the reason that your wife is upset about the way that meal times are arranged is because her grandmother was beat by her grandfather, and that's playing a role in, it's played a role in determining her unconscious expectations, and that's pathologizing one of the day-to-day rituals in the house. And if you're going to unpack that, you're going to have to unpack all of that into, you take a little monster and you decompose it and you find out it's a hydra, it's got 50 heads. And then you have to work through every single one of those. It's really, really difficult. And so it's a container that contains everything. But the thing is, if you unpack it successfully, let's say, and you deal with it, you negotiate a consensus, then all of a sudden you get peace, say, around your meal times, which is a major accomplishment, man, because you have to eat 3 times a day, and it's the center of the household and all of that. So, but the thing is that often, when you're, especially in the context of an intimate relationship, things will emerge that produce discontinuities. And the question is, what should your attitude towards that discontinuity be? Well, you can punish the person for manifesting the discontinuity. That's the tyrannical aspect. Or you can let it take the whole thing apart, and that will happen. I mean, that's often how relationships end, is that a discontinuity emerges, and people get into it, and things go sideways so badly that the whole relationship descends into chaos, and people bail out of it. And so it's no wonder that people want to ignore it. And it's also no wonder that they want to tyrannize it. It's like, quit bothering me with that. Well, possibly, but probably not. And also, if my attitude towards you is quit bothering me with that, your attitude towards me when I have the same sort of problem in reverse is going to be exactly the same. And so we're not going to get anywhere with it. There's an old story about how to catch a monkey. In case any of you are interested in how to catch a monkey, now you're going to know how to do it. First, you have to take a large, narrow-necked jar, just large enough in diameter at the top for a monkey to put its hand inside. Then you have to fill it partway with rocks so it's too heavy for the monkey to carry. Then you scatter some treats near the jar to attract them, and you put some inside the narrow-necked jar. A monkey will come along, if you're lucky, and grab the goodies, but he'll want the ones inside the jar too, so then put his hand in there and grab what's in there. And if you've set up your monkey trap properly, then he won't be able to get his hand out because he's got the goodies. Not without unclenching his hand, not without relinquishing what he already has. The monkey catcher can just walk over and just pick up the monkey, because the monkey isn't into the whole sacrifice thing, because he's just a monkey, And so you can catch him as a consequence of his own unregulated hypothalamic desires. And to be, what would you say, charitable to the monkey, if you put out candy or something like that, it's like, how often does a monkey get candy? He's probably a little more motivated than you are to not let go, but you get the point. The monkey catcher can just walk over to the jar and pick up the monkey. The animal will not sacrifice the part for the whole. That's actually a pretty good phrase, hey? It's the animal that will not sacrifice the part for the whole. Perhaps this story is apocryphal, but as an eccentric psychology professor once told me, fiction lies to you in the most truthful possible manner. Something valuable given up ensures future prosperity. Something valuable sacrificed pleases the Lord. Those are equivalent statements. One's more articulated, I would say that's the first statement, and the second one is more dramatic and more embedded in a collective religious dream, you might say. What's most valuable and best sacrificed? Well, obviously that depends on the culture and the time. What is at least emblematic of that? A choice cut of meat. Well, if you're a herdsman, for example, that's a big deal. Generally speaking, throughout human history, meat has been a very valuable commodity, as it is, by the way, among chimpanzees. Chimpanzees hunt. They like to hunt colobus monkeys. And, they'll basically start eating the damn monkey alive. They weigh about 40 pounds, despite the fact that the thing is screaming away. And that's pretty interesting, because one of the things it indicates is that male monkeys, male chimps, they're the ones that do the hunting, aren't really inhibited that much when they're in hunter mode by what you might describe as empathy. And there's certain elements of human behavior that are reminiscent of that. You see that sort of thing emerge now and then in human battlefields when groups of men seem to abandon all internal regulation whatsoever to a degree that makes you wonder if internal regulation even exists.